Today we have Jennifer Zeszut. She's CEO of Beckon. We're a SaaS analytics software company created by and for marketers. Jennifer has been a marketing leader for most of her career at companies like eBay, Procter & Gamble, and Cost Plus World Market. She was a trusted advisor to many more brands as the head of strategy and analytics for Razorfish for many years. So prior to Beckon, she founded Scout Labs, a leading social media monitoring and analytics and engagement platform, which was sold to Lithium Technologies in 2010. She has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, and TechCrunch, and was invited to speak about entrepreneurship at the White House as part of President Barack Obama's Startup Initiative. Welcome, Jenny, and take it away.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good morning, everyone. So I want to start just a little bit with my own background quickly because it's a great, transition to the topic at hand of Scorecards today. So I happen to be a CEO now, but I've been a marketer for my entire career, as Bonnie mentioned, at brands and also on the consulting side. And performance reporting is so key. It's really the storytelling function for our entire function of marketing, and it just happens to be done quite poorly in marketing. So, in all of those years of either reporting to CEOs or being in board meetings, you got the finance team, and their numbers are just so tight and so elegant and so neat, and even sales and HR and operations and all of the other groups do a great job. If you have a question about financial performance, it's just nice, neat, and tidy reporting. You ask a question about marketing performance, and it's just hard. It's kind of a mess. So, really there's a massive frustration that I know I perceived as a marketer. If this is the finance baby, then this is kind of the marketing baby, and that's the perception of us and our function quite often around the table in a cross-functional team. So, we have a bigger problem, which is true, than finance. We have incredibly messy marketing data. And if you want to know where our spend is and where our performance data is, it's kind of all over the place. And it is just a mess itself. So we do have a hard challenge. It's not like we don't know what we're doing. We do have a very messy data problem. So Beckon, just quickly before we jump into Scorecards, so see our role in this whole thing is, the outputs of all of those various tools and all of those various teams. They could be agencies. They could be, Fred in finance that has a key piece of the data. The outputs of all of those become inputs into Beckon and our united, normalized marketing performance data hub. And then there's dashboards, and then there's scorecards, and of course that data is used in many other places other than in Beckon to power econometric or mixed models or all kinds of analyses across the organization. But it is a way to finally get the data in one place, to put it in the hands of the people, to democratize that data, and dashboards and scorecards, which of course is the subject of today's presentation. So, we like to say that we all do this job for a reason. We are marketers because we know that great marketing moves the needle on the business, that we are a huge driver of performance. And that's really why we exist, is to help brands both understand and also beautifully communicate the business impact of everything that marketing does. And we do that for CMOs and heads of marketing and heads of marketing analytics at many, many brands. And really, scorecards, they are the storytelling piece of marketing performance, and they're so key. So excited to have you all here today. We'll be covering some definitions, just what it is and what it isn't. Talk a little bit about history, obviously benefits, but want to get into the nuts and bolts of some different types of frameworks, because really how you pick the framework and how you structure your scorecard is really the narrative for your performance storytelling. So it's key to choose the right one. Lots of pro tips sprinkled along the way, lots of examples from existing customers and how different brands and CMOs use scorecards today, and all of the assets and resources that you need to get started to build your own. So before we jump into some big, deep content, we always want to do a couple little polls. This allows us to kind of take the pulse of the market and also trend this over time to just get a state, a kind of snapshot state of things. So the first question, if you guys have you should have your little polling controls there. How often are you actually looking at and assessing marketing performance between channels, between various tactics, across all of your various mix? How often do you do that analysis, and how often do you actually, so how often do you do it? Is this an annual thing? Is it a quarterly exercise all the way down to, we got computers doing this, and it's totally programmatic, and all of our stuff is automated many, many times per day. So answer that one, please. We'll give everyone just a minute here. All right, that should be enough time. Okay, so we got 22% annual, which is a typical kind of planning cycle. Quarterly, no surprises here, once a month. And then we start getting into 10%, doing it once a week, and 1.7 and many times per day. Great, that's wonderful. I mean, as you know, this is incredibly difficult to do right now. So the amount of effort and work that it requires to actually pull this data together makes it impossible to often do this on a very frequent basis, unless there's some very systemic changes in how you're collecting that data and reporting. The second polling question of today is really around consistency, because scorecards is the best practice for scorecards is to have consistent set of criteria. So the question really is, if you run a big program or you run a campaign, how often are you using exact same criteria and KPIs? And a KPI is a criteria by which something should be judged. To use the same criteria and the same KPIs every single time, where it's kind of an agreed upon template and everything gets assessed by that? Or is it just some of the time where we have we recommended KPIs and best practices, but it doesn't always get used? Or is it kind of up to the execution team or the agency partner to kind of pick and choose metrics and KPIs to report on a more ad hoc basis after the campaign is over? Guess I'm not allowed to vote. Take a look. So, yeah, there we go. So only 16% have a very, consistent templates in place. The 23% rarely, and this is kind of a classic thing with marketing, a lot of times we'll run something and then we see the metrics afterwards, and we, or the teams try to highlight exactly the numbers that look good, but aren't necessarily the numbers that we need. And consistency is going to be an important theme as we talk through scorecards today, because consistency allows us to benchmark. It allows us to compare things apples to apples, because while we're in apples to oranges to fruitcake, it becomes very difficult. So consistency is a big theme that we're going to talk about today. So thank you all for taking that poll. So quickly, feel free to take frantic notes. That's great. But know that even for download now, I believe in your console you have a resources tab or something. So a copy of this presentation. There is a blank template, and you can print out a bunch of these and kind of start playing with some of the some scorecards, and there's some definitions and tips there on how to think about building your own, and we'll cover that today. We'll give you some example. There's a sample scorecard in there. We throw this one in. We'll get into this a little bit later, but everyone is very often the questions are around what are the right omnichannel KPIs. So this is a Beckon POV on a KPI performance framework. And then most of the topics and examples that we're covering today, best practices and worst practices, are in the scorecard. So all of those resources you can download now or at the end. They're all available to you guys. So let's get started. Let's get started a long ways ago. So this is just kind of a fun one that we found. In fact, the earliest known form of writing, which is cuneiform, it appeared more than 7,000 years ago, and it was made by stamping wedges into clay tablets and firing them in a kiln. So archaeologists have uncovered literally millions of these. They really are the earliest known documents, and a large majority of these are basically business records. Records of economic transactions, how many bushels of grain were exchanged with which trading partners and how much, which is really fascinating. So, before letters, before alphabets, before literature, before Shakespeare, before everything, we had charts, and the need to document and visualize business information has been one of man's earliest priorities. So that's kind of a fun one. Fast forwarding a little bit, I'm sure everyone has heard of the phrase the balanced scorecard. It is the marketing scorecard, which we're going to talk about. It is a strategic planning and management tool, and it takes its cues from this balanced scorecard system, which was developed by Robert Kaplan and David Norton from Harvard Business School about 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. It's been used in organizations around ever since, and the balanced scorecard is a data-driven performance measurement system that aligns business activities to business strategy and allows teams to be monitoring and improving the business over time. It breaks the amorphous whole into its subparts so that they can track and measure the various components of business success. Six Sigma, this is another one that marketing scorecards obviously have its roots in here. It's more of a process improvement methodology. Motorola developed it in 1986, but Jack Welch of GE adopted it a decade later. And many companies have adopted it since. And the cool one about this is that Six Sigma, the philosophy behind Six Sigma is that there's no one thing that makes companies great. It is instead it is a commitment to measuring all the little pieces and all the tiny little decisions that come together to make a business great. So if you think about it for marketing, it's not the one-time annual budget allocation across channels that you do once a year. That's not what makes or breaks marketing. But it is the millions of little tiny ongoing small decisions that everyone on your team, everyone on your extended team, your agency partners, all the decisions they're making on a daily basis. And when we track and we measure and we optimize our marketing efforts using tools like scorecards, then we're learning and we're proving our performance systematically. So these are all roots to the marketing scorecards that we're going to talk through today, and important thinking that I think needs to come back into marketing. So what is a marketing scorecard? What are we talking about here? So if you just do a straight up search on Google and look at Google Images, oh my gosh, there's so many. There's so many different ways to look at scorecards. So looking at this quickly, you might think, well, what exactly is it? Is it really about information density? Is it about putting and cramming as many numbers as possible onto a screen? Because all of these are incredibly information dense. That's one hypothesis. And is it just a pretty picture? Is it a nice visualization? A lot of these are incredibly ugly, so they don't really lend themselves to that. But some of these are pretty pictures. But they're not just information dense screens. They're not just pretty pictures. This is my definition of a marketing scorecard. It is, in fact, a data-driven marketing performance measurement system. It is a system that aligns marketing activities to business strategy and allows teams to monitor and improve marketing over time. So information density might be a byproduct, pretty might be a byproduct, but really this is a system for aligning marketing activities to business outcomes and monitoring and improving marketing over time. Those are the key things. And if done well, and if you do it right, it does become an incredibly powerful storytelling vehicle for marketing and its success in the business. So we're going to talk about some of that a little bit later. One question that always comes up is, all right, dashboards, scorecards. You have dashboards. Why do you need scorecards? Why does it have to be both? Or do I need both? All those sorts of things. Obviously, Beckon has dashboards too, so and you can get a lot of stuff into dashboards. But dashboards are really optimized for showing events and trends and things as they're happening, what is happening and what's going on. Scorecards are optimized for progress towards some kind of a goal or an objective. Similarly, dashboards optimize for what's happening, and scorecards are optimized for how well you're doing. And so they do have slightly different functions, although scorecards, how well are we doing, the question is always going to be, what is actually going on? Why is that number? And that's when sometimes the link between the scorecard and that dashboard becomes key, but they do have slightly different objectives in terms of what they're trying to communicate. So a couple things we want to do today. We definitely want to run through some of what makes for a good marketing scorecard. I doubt this is a new concept for anyone on the call. You probably have some KPIs. You probably have Excel spreadsheets, and you probably have something in place. But you're here to get some ideas for around better ways to do it and some of the best practices for getting these things done. And so we're gonna run through all of these, each of these, and talk about them separately. So I won't go through them all right now. So let's take it from the top. So binding tactical metrics to a strategic framework. What this means is that, as you know, there's no shortage of marketing KPIs or metrics. We got opens and clicks and likes and tweets and followers and GRPs and TRPs and fans and visits and so many, performance quote-unquote metrics coming out of our various systems, our various teams, our various tools. That's not the problem. A best practice for a scorecard is to wrap these in some sort of a strategic framework so that these things aren't random. A handful of these metrics, or maybe the sum of some of these metrics, or maybe the average of some of these metrics, are the KPIs for some kind of a business objective, like increasing awareness or increasing or driving sales or growing engagements or whatever those things are. And we're going to talk about some of those frameworks and ways to bundle KPIs to tell your story. But it's really important that it is not just information density that crams as many of these little tiny squares or as little tiny metrics and KPIs onto one screen as possible, because you're not communicating what the objective was for those things or what story those things tell. So that's one key, which you're going to see in the examples that are coming up here. The second one here is that this concept of consistency, pre-specified criteria. The ideal is not the classic, we did it and then let's look through all of the various metrics and see which ones are good and let's report on those ones that look good. That is what gives us marketers a bad name. It's the curse that we have. Even though it'll be a process over time to really hone and understand what that perfect scorecard is, we have to be reporting against pre-specified criteria. And the definition of a KPI in my mind is the criteria by which something should be judged. And ideally when we start a campaign or we kick off a campaign, the criteria by which that thing should be judged should be articulated in advance of the kickoff, whether it's and very often we do briefs, we talk about strategic goals, we talk about who we're targeting. A lot of times we talk about creative aspects of the brief. There is a performance brief as well that articulates what the KPIs are by which that effort should be judged. And it should be consistent. Maybe not across the board. Maybe you do run some top-of-the-funnel campaigns, which are different from bottom-of-the-funnel campaigns, and those are slightly different. But if we're running 50 top-of-the-funnel campaigns, the KPIs for those top-of-the-funnel efforts should be the same. And that's going to allow us to say, of all of the 50 things that we did to drive top-of-the-funnel performance, we can actually apples to apples compare them to each other and understand what had the higher ROI and what had lower ROIs. So consistent campaign scorecards, consistent brand. So, we work with Coke. We work with a lot of CPGs that have a lot of portfolios. Brand to brand, how do we want to be looking at marketing performance? That should be a pre-specified set of criteria. Countries, we work with a ton of global brands. So, from country to country to country, how can we set up a consistent set of KPIs or scorecard by which those things should be judged? So, I will move on, but it's a very key point. Context to the data. Another problem that we marketers tend to do is we just throw numbers out there. And we usually get the classic response, which is, and so what? Is that a good number? Is that a bad number? Like, what does that mean? Why are you telling me this? So there are many different ways to provide context to the data, and different times when they make sense. I'm just throwing out some kind of some of the obvious ones, but here is the number, and it is better than or worse than the planned number. How are we tracking against planned? Trend, which is, the current period versus previous, performance period. So it might be here are today's metrics versus yesterday. We're trending up, we're trending down. It could be this week versus previous week. That's what trend is. But once again, it's a perspective that you're giving on a data point. It can be the historical trend, so it could be year over year, or here's our back to school, here, GAP's Q4 effort compared to other past Q4 efforts, that kind of historical. It could be internal benchmarking. We sometimes call this performance versus comparable, which is a specific chart in Beckon. But it could be, the last time we did a Facebook and Pinterest combo program, how does this compare to other Facebook and Pinterest, combo programs that we've run? So some kind of a internal benchmark. And then there's external benchmarking. And if you have access to, or if you're, either subscribe to, I guess with social, you always have access to some competitive data via social. You might be subscribing to a Nielsen or something that gives you either pricing or marketing spend information. There's many different sources for external benchmarking data. But once again, it's another option for providing context. Here's how much we spent, but let's compare that to our competitors who spent 10 times what we did, which is why our performance is going to be low. So context. Never put out a number if you haven't picked one of these or given some sort of perspective to the receiver of that information on how to process and how to think about that number. Continuously updated. I cannot tell you how many dejected people and really the Beckon Scorecards are inspired by some amazing, beautifully designed and rendered giant pieces of paper on people's walls that they print once a year. And it doesn't get used if it's not continuously updated. And so, obviously you got two choices, either from a process perspective, every single metric on that scorecard needs to have a data owner. Who is the person who needs to contribute that number, what data they enter it, either it's a shared repository where they're putting that number or they're emailing it to a person and somebody is cutting and pasting. You're either doing this via process or you're doing this via automation with, something like a Beckon, which is making and getting that data to continuously flow from all of the various locations. So however you do it, got to make sure that this is continuously updated. Otherwise, it is a lot of work and no one will look at it because once a year is not enough. The other kind of fatal flaw of scorecards is the inability to drill down into detail. So you're going to see a scorecard, everything's looking green, and suddenly there's one big red thing, and everyone is going to want to click and go into the next level of detail on that. If you can't zoom in, or if you can't get access to the underlying data, then all you're showing is the what, and there's no ability to drill down to the why. So that's another a key one that is going to catch you up if you don't think about it up front and in advance. So those are some of the best practices. I want to transition now to the actual scorecard. So we're going to talk through the elements of a good scorecard, and then we'll move on to some various frameworks for ways that you want to structure your scorecard. So key elements. This is kind of small, but hopefully you guys can see it. At least our recommendation and best practice is to start at the top with some kind of an objective. And so, this may be in each of the frameworks that we show you. It might be the buyer's journey, which is the framework that you choose to structure or organize your scorecard, but it still needs to be. We suggest that it is articulated as a key goal or objective. So, we want to drive more awareness, we want to drive more engagement, we want to drive more sales, we want to drive more upsells or cross-sells, we want to drive more loyalty. They should be objectives that you as a business or as a marketing team have, and we even further, we love that kind of idea of right underneath that objective, like awareness, is to either tee it up with some kind of a description or some kind of a question, which is, are we actually getting more people to be aware of our brand and getting in the consideration set for them? Whatever that question is. And the KPIs and the metrics that follow are going to be some of the answers to that really strategic business question. So the next level down is going to be your KPIs as just different from everything below that, which is a metric. There's different types of metrics that we'll talk about. It's important to brainstorm and to think through all of the various metrics that tell a story of whether you're moving the needle on that objective, and we're looking kind of in a column here, not rows. But the exercise of going through and picking of all of those, 8 metrics that are interesting or useful to deliver, to see whether we're performing or delivering against that objective, is the exercise of going through and saying, what is the one? Is there one which is really, and it doesn't have to be one. You can absolutely choose 2, but it can't be 10. There aren't 10 kind of key performance indicators. There's got to be one main one, and it usually tends to be a ratio. It could be volume metric, but ratios tend to be pretty powerful. We'll talk a little bit more about those. But picking a single 1 or 2 KPIs from all of the potential metrics is an important focusing exercise for your team. And this is just the metrics can be of many different types. There are volume metrics, which is overall, how much are we delivering, how many engagements, how much traffic to the website, how many lead download forms, how many eyeballs are we getting in front of, those sorts of things. Those are volume type metrics. But then there's the efficiency metrics, which are around cost pers, and this could be, cost per impression, cost per engagement, cost per, any of those sorts of things. Those are good indicators of how efficient we're getting, whether we're getting more efficient or less efficient at driving that objective. And then there's the final category of just overall effectiveness, which is usually the rate of change of moving people along, from one stage to another. So this might be, the engagement rate or the click-through rate of all of the eyeballs that we delivered, which is an volume metric. What is the rate at what percentage of those actually engaged with that content? Another good one is the paid to earned media ratio, which means of all of the eyeballs that we're driving, how many of those were paid eyeballs that we had to pay for versus how many of those eyeballs came for free because we created some creative or some content that was passed along. Like those are the types of effectiveness metrics that we like to see in scorecards as well. So objectives, I'm not going to run through all of these, but some best practices for how to structure your objectives. Ideally, you have them set up as SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. The KPIs, we talked through this. best, what are those things that are the answer to the key business question, and then these metrics, which are key. And so this one is, what are the right metrics that matter, and what should I include? This is a whole separate webinar that I think we've done. If we haven't, we should do this one, Bonnie and Beckon team. But we will include this in your resources packet. It's just some suggestions of those volume metrics, those effectiveness metrics, those efficiency metrics at both different activities and aggregates and strategic metrics for each of those. So these are some suggestions for more omni-channel or cross-channel metrics and KPIs. So we'll throw that those are available for download in your resources. Okay, I'm going to take a quick breath here before we jump into frameworks. And as I said, how do we want to structure our scorecard? It's the key question because really it is your narrative. This is your plot. This is your storyline. So we're going to run through some of these today and talk a bit about pros and cons. So by buyer's journey, by business objective, by key campaigns, by marketing objective, by marketing channel. And then I also say all of the above because, I think that there is a scorecard for the chief marketing officer. There is a scorecard that is very high level and very, big and wide and broad, but there also you might want a scorecard for lots of different pieces of the business. So it's okay to actually have a couple of different ones. Like let's look at our key campaign scorecard as different from our buyer's journey scorecard as different from another one that we have set up. So it is okay to have multiple, and almost all companies do have multiple ones. So that's okay. I'm going to start with this because this is the one that's probably the easiest to do, right? This is marketing's natural place because it's one of the easiest, right? We have an email team, we have a display team, we have a paid search team, we have an agency doing our TV. Marketing executes in silos. It just kind of has to, and don't feel bad about yourself if you don't have fully integrated omni-channel execution. Marketing doesn't happen that way. Our tools are specialized. We have an email tool. We have, paid search tools that are different. And even agencies or partners that we work with, they are specialists. In this amount of complexity in the marketing landscape, we need specialists. So it's okay that we're executing in channels. And this is how the data comes, right? We use an email tool. We got an email report. They do banners and display ads. We have display reports, and so on and so forth. So the easiest to do is to pull a couple numbers from each of those executional silos and put them on a single screen. I put this up and at a conference at the American Marketing Association Analytics Conference, and we were talking about omnichannel, and I said, this is not omnichannel. And a lot of hands went up and said, what do you mean? That's totally omnichannel. That's all the channels all together on one screen. And so I'm going to say that this may be especially if you're organized this way, it might be an interesting information-dense way to organize your scorecard, but this is not omnichannel. Siloed metrics sitting side by side, or siloed execution channels sitting side by side, is not omnichannel, is not thinking about how those things are working together to move the needle against customers. So I guess I didn't think this was controversial, but I guess it was a little controversial because everyone was like, what? You just crossed out the only omnichannel thing. And I don't think about that as omnichannel at all. So buyer's journey. This is a framework that is our favorite. It's not always needed at all times, but it's a very powerful framework because, number one, it shows you and allows the company to be thinking about everything that it does through the lens of the customer. It also has a huge benefit because this buyer's journey, and I'm just giving you an example of like a five-stage journey. It could be a 20-stage journey. It could be 3 stages. However you think about it, it has to be customized for you and for your brand. But it really does map to almost the definition of marketing. So Philip Kotler and the books of, marketing management, it kind of defines marketing as that function which, makes people aware that you exist, engages with them, gets them to purchase you, and gets them to be loyal and to continue to buy more over time and tell other people about it. It's kind of the definition of marketing. So it becomes a pretty good useful framework. If someone says, oh, sorry, our marketing team doesn't do any of those things, that would be weird. So the buyer's journey really maps to the way that marketing works. It also is almost, can be almost universally used for almost any campaign, because even if you are doing you're working on any one particular campaign, there's usually some component which is top of the funnel, and there's some component which is middle of the funnel, and there may be no bottom of the funnel goals for a lot of your marketing campaigns. But overall, looking at marketing and how effective it is being overall, this allows you to have marketing activities and business outcomes, both initial sale and upsells, all together in the same lens. And we need to be watching to see where things are working and things are not working. The powerful thing about a journey, and so if you look at this scorecard on the screen, there's a flow, there's a logical flow. The one that we looked at before, which is, email, display, paid search, and TV, these columns don't connect to each other. It is information density. This is a logical flow, and there's a rate of change and a rate at which we are moving people through the funnel that becomes really powerful. How good are our awareness driving efforts and all of the impressions that we're putting out there at getting some sort of engagement? What is that engagement rate? And is that part working? From the people who engage with us and click through, what percentage are actually purchasing? And then again, what percentage of those are actually, using and or upselling or buying more or amplifying or telling friends and those sorts of things. So the powerful piece about organizing your scorecard around the buyer's journey is it really gives you a bit of a flow, a logical flow between pieces. And too often, and we talk about this with a lot of our clients, too often marketing measures two things. It measures total marketing spend, amount of advertising or total marketing spend, and then revenue that pops out the other end. And the problem with that is, what about, how do you know? Like, what if you spend a lot on marketing and then revenue doesn't pop out the other end? What worked? What didn't work? What was performing? Where were the problems? How do I go and fix that? I don't know, because I only have two numbers. I have the starting point and I have the ending point. But what a buyer's journey gives us is like a series of diagnostic metrics all along a journey. And the perfect example is, of course, e-commerce. So if you run an e-commerce site and you are trying to optimize your e-commerce flow, there is no e-commerce company in the world that measures two numbers, the total number of traffic to the homepage and the total number of sales at the end of a day. They would never do that. They would measure, of all of the people that came to the website, how many people are doing searches. Of the people doing searches, how many are adding to cart? Of the people who initiate cart, how many people are closing? Right? They're getting this whole set of KPIs in a logical flow. So if revenues are down for one day, they might see green, 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 everything's great, and oh my God, nobody added to cart. Oh my God, it looks like the add to cart functionality wasn't working that day. So they've got a series of diagnostics. And that's what we can do with something like a scorecard like this with the buyer's journey, is it gives us diagnostic metrics along a path to purchase and to business outcomes. So we don't have to wait until the end of holiday to look and say, oh, darn, we missed our Q4 number. As soon as Q4 begins, and we've got 12 whole weeks, in that week one, we can be looking at all of these diagnostics along in a flow or in a chain, and we can say, oh my gosh, the paid to earned media ratio is lower. Our engagement rate is much lower than it has been for comparable campaigns or this time last year. And now we've got 11 more weeks to change the creative, optimize the creative, do whatever it takes to get to improve our marketing performance and actually change the course of the revenue events or the business outcome events for the company. So for so many reasons, this is our favorite and one where we really love to get customers thinking through the eyes of the customer, because this is really how this is marketing's job going forward. So another pro tip on this, which I know it seems tiny, it's just this little drop-down menu there at the top, but being able, what this represents is that and I guess I should show you what we're talking about here. So it could be, now let's look at this for any one of our key initiatives, right? What this means is, sorry, I've got to go back and forth here. What it means is that for a campaign, from campaign to campaign to campaign, we're always, for all of our key initiatives, we use the same criteria. And I can just toggle and click through each of our key initiatives, or we set up one of these for each of our various regions. This could be, Colombia versus Spain or whatever it is, but brand to brand, region to region, maybe category to category. Mondelez has got, they've got snack, they got beverage, all of those sorts of things. How do we think about our categories, those sorts of things? Now, the idea of being able to toggle between these things means a lot, right? Obviously, the data has to have been collected. It has to have been tagged consistently. You have to have come up with, consistent KPIs. But it is a wonderful, it is so much benefit if you do this right to be able to toggle through and compare things side by side. So another framework, another possible framework, is according to business objectives. So the CEO and the business might have some big overarching objectives, like we are going to grow share, we are going to, launch and be more innovative in the market, we are going to drive sales, we want to increase customer satisfaction, whatever those kind of big business objectives are, we can organize around that, and then either have kind of marketing's contribution to each of those business objectives, or if this is a CEO scorecard, obviously all of the various functional areas from HR to operations to finance, all the KPIs coming together as one. So it really could be either way. Another one could be by marketing objectives. So once again, similarly, the CMO might have some big key milestones or objectives around growing share amongst males 11 to 17 and engaging another certain audience and reaching or revenue or whatever it is. Another great one is to, lay those out. These are different than buyer's journey. The buyer's journey that we talked about had this logical flow between columns. So, it kind of logically flowed from column 1 to column 2 to column 3. There's no connection between the columns here, but it is still marketing KPIs, marketing activity metrics in support of something really strategic, whether it being business objectives or marketing objectives in this case. And another one we want to throw out just to show you that consistency, that if you have a consistent set of KPIs, and especially for brands that have a lot of big rocks and big campaigns, B2B marketers tend to have more evergreen, continuously always on running campaigns and don't have these giant episodic, big things, but Coke does and Gap does, and there's so some really big pillars for the brand in terms of campaigns. So that is another way to even organize this. And once again, it's not even an alternative. You can have a buyer's journey scorecard, but then also have the campaign scorecard, which shows side by side how each of our big rocks have been doing, what were more cost effective, what were less cost effective, looking at some of those effectiveness rates, paid to earn media ratios, engagement rates, those sorts of things, to really understand kind of best practices. Why did this one do so well? What was the messaging that we used here that caused so much amplification versus some of these other ones? Because we want to learn from that. We want to continuously improve. We want to iterate and use the messages that worked going forward. where to start? This is a question we always get. It's like, we want to create one. How do we do this? And obviously, the simpler, the smaller the footprint or the smaller company you are, the less complexity you have to deal with. Although, let me just say, marketing is complex. Omnichannel marketing is very complex, and no matter how small you are, you still probably have a bit of a data mess. If you are a portfolio brand, or if you have a bunch of different types of, key segments or whatever it is, Gap has got a bunch of, Gap Inc. has Gap brand and Old Navy and Banana Republic, whatever it is. If you're a portfolio brand like that, one option, and also regions, right? You could be organized geographically and have a bit of a decentralized marketing model where you have a lot of different teams and a lot of different regions, be it global or local. One option is to stay focused, like pick a country or pick a brand, and just go really deep and create a perfectly wonderful scorecard just for that one country or that one brand. It serves to be incredibly exhaustive and serves to be a great example and just have a ton of great KPIs top to bottom for that one brand. That's a great place to start. Sorry, I'm jumping back again. Because what that does is it makes Spain and Canada and the U.S. go, oh, that's so cool. I want one of those. So it allows you to give you kind of a tentpole around which others can be inspired and want to participate. Another way to start, especially depending, once again, on your organization, if you're in the centralized marketing team and centralized marketing function and oh my gosh, coordinating and getting all of that data from, the Turkey team and, the Colombia team is going to be a huge pain. You can absolutely go wide. Just pick a couple of KPIs, just a handful of things. And the benefit of this is it gets U.S. and Canada and France and Spain or all of those various brands or all those various contributors used to the process of adding in and bringing forth a couple of metrics, bringing a couple of those things forward. And then over time, you can add another and then ask for another and ask for another and kind of get deeper over time. A great one to start is kind of do both to create simultaneously kind of a thin and wide dashboard that has great coverage, because that is something that CMO and top leadership, they care about wide, but then also find someone or some brand, which is a hand raiser, that says, I would love to have my stuff, metric top to bottom, and to be a great benchmark for the rest of the organization. So those two things can work together really well if you can orchestrate them both at the same time. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of key takeaways. Marketing scorecards, I really hope you understand this is not a pretty picture. Marketing does not have a pretty pictures problem. We have a problem with a systematic problem, and the concept of putting in a scorecard is not putting in a pretty picture. It's putting in a data-driven performance measurement system, and it allows for alignment, gets everyone literally on the same page, and it supports, if it's continuously updated, it supports continuous performance optimization. So this is not a lightweight effort. This is actually a very strategic and foundational effort for your performance marketing. Consider buyer's journey. You don't have to, but it is a pretty powerful one. But at the very least, try to avoid the single screen that has lots of squares from all of your various silos. It's not our favorite. Try to map it to strategic objectives. Continuously updated, have a plan for that, whether it be automation or via processes. And be prepared. This thing is going to travel far and wide. We have seen, of all the things marketing has ever generated, and actually we were at dinner, I think it was last night before, at the MarTech conference, and someone said, yeah, we got a scorecard, and it's 189 PowerPoint slides, which we send around and we mail around every quarter. And it was like, that no one really looks at those. This, if you build it right, and if you build this in the right way, many people are going to be looking at it. So make sure you put your best foot forward, because it's actually going to travel far and wide. And we've heard this from so many people. Because this is a storytelling mechanism. And because this is mapping marketing activities to business objectives or business outcomes, if we do it right, you are going to be hearing this. You're going to hear, oh, that's what you do. You might even hear it from your team, like, oh my gosh, look at us, look what we're doing. You'll certainly hear it from other parts of the organization who say, oh my gosh, look at marketing, and that is what we want. That is the point of Scorecards. So again, I think it's available for download now. If you don't download it now, or if you had to drop off the call, I believe we mail or send you a link or send you an email. But you can get a copy of this presentation. We'll have the performance scorecard worksheets. We'll give you a couple of one big sample one that you can put on your wall and dream about. The KPI frameworks, which just gives you some suggestions for some of the integrated or derivative or good diagnostic metrics that people don't use enough of. And then in the white paper, which just came out, that has a lot of great examples of ways to structure and ways not to structure with pros and cons for each of those. Beckon also does these workshops in person in a couple locations around the country. So we can make those available if we happen to be in your town or your city. Send over some executives, and we can actually get these big old 11 by 17 scorecards and workshop these with you. So thank you, and that is where I wrap up. I think we have some time for questions.
We do. Thank you very much, Jenny. And we've had a number of questions come in, so we're going to hope to get to as many as we can before we let you go at the top of the hour.
Okay.
They've been coming in during the broadcast, and one of them was we talked quite a bit about KPIs, and you want to pick some of the single best performance indicator that you can think of. But the question is, what's a good KPI and what's a bad KPI? What's an example of something that just would not work?
Got it. Obviously, a KPI should be a diagnostic of whatever the objective is. So, it's hard to answer that question without knowing what the objective is. But some of the ones that some of the just general concepts that I can suggest. I'm not a huge fan of pure volume metrics, which is the total number of impressions or the total number of traffic to the website or any of those sorts of things. The problem with volume is it doesn't give us any context. Once again, perspective on whether is that high or low. Maybe we threw a ton of money against it, and that it's in and of itself, a volume metric is hard to communicate a story. That's the reason why I like ratios and rates. A good KPI is one, whether it is cost per new point of consideration from our brand tracker study. That is a numerator and a denominator, and it communicates, that one blended number communicates a lot. It shows efficiency and whether that's trending up or down over time. Or something like a paid to earned media ratio is got a numerator and a denominator, which is our paid impressions, and all of our earned impressions, which comes from all of our kind of social or other places where people could be amplifying our messages, and watching that as a brand over time. The hot brands are the ones that don't have to buy all of its eyeballs, obviously. If you're doing something right, you have a higher ratio of earned impressions than paid impressions. And that's why those ratios become so powerful. They become either efficiency metrics when you have spend as a denominator, or they become effectiveness metrics but the pure volume metrics don't tend to be as diagnostic as a KPI.
All right, thanks. Next one you're going to love. So question came up about how do you integrate online and offline metrics if you're going to look at a buyer's journey, right? We talked about to create a story of the effectiveness at driving folks through the buyer's journey. How do you link offline and online metrics so that they relate to each other?
Got it. If the objective is to increase awareness of or make sure that we generate impressions out in the marketplace. You have the concept of an impression can be a single normalized unit, which has both offline tactics, which are driving those, and online tactics, which are driving those. So, it might be called an impression unit over here, and it might be called a TRP over there, but you can create a normalized concept called, an awareness unit, and that can be either driven by digital, or it can be driven by offline. Of course, with offline and traditional metrics, very often it doesn't continue. You don't have the engagement metrics that kind of move down the funnel. It's rare that we have billboard clicks or any of those sorts of things. So you're not going to have the engagement units coming from those. But by putting them all together in one place, you are actually able to look at how the things interrelate. So when Converse turns on billboards in the San Francisco market to support their new San Francisco store opening, when they turn those billboards on, oh my gosh, the minute they turn those on, it looks like the click-through rate on the banner ads are higher. The open rates of the emails are higher. The inbound search volume or natural search volume is higher. Those sorts of the interactions between the offline and online that you're looking for, and by putting those metrics together in one single system, in one single place, we now have the ability to look and see those connections between online and offline that we never saw before. We always intuit that as marketers. We intuitively know that when we do all of this stuff, it probably somehow must work together. But only when the online and the offline come together in one single place do you actually start to see those connections between your efforts.
Okay, that's actually a good segue to the next question. So that was the discussion of kind of online and offline and how they get blended together. But this one is drilling down into an awareness metric. For instance, an impression doesn't necessarily mean that the person saw it. It means that the impression was served. Yeah. So are there other awareness data that you can use to talk about awareness, like surveys or measurable things that are a little more concrete?
Yeah, so we actually recommend a couple different things. So usually the word awareness, consideration, purchase intent, likelihood to buy, those tend to be survey-based metrics. And if you can afford and are doing it, if you can't afford, everyone can afford it. There's many different ways to be doing this type of polling and surveying. So it's important to have both of those things. It's important to have your survey results or your brand tracker results in your scorecard, because that is a wonderful, consistent index over time of whether that's going up or down. It kind of doesn't matter what the number is. Even if you index it, just do it as an index, is it trending up or trending down? And you can do, awareness as the percentage of people in the survey or whatever your methodology is that said, yes, I am aware of Converse, and I'm a male 11 to 17. So it's, or top 2 box awareness, however you're measuring that. So that should be in there. That absolutely should be in there as awareness. But it also, to the previous point, which is how do you know about impressions, whether they're served and or they're viewed or not viewed? It is just different. You got to call it something different. There's surveyed awareness, which is one of your metrics and a potential key performance indicator of your brand's awareness. But we should also be tracking the total amount of awareness that we're driving with our advertising. And we do recommend separating out known served eyeballs as different from maybe delivered impressions. Things like PR and circulation values are not delivered impressions. Things like theoretical potential reach, those are not delivered impressions. So we do recommend separating those things out too. So you can have a total number of actual, measured impressions served, which is different from theoretical impressions or reach number or metric. And then separately, you can have another one, which is your survey-based brand tracker number, like awareness or consideration or likelihood to buy, any of those sorts of things. So they're different, and to make sure to not confuse those and to call them different things and track them separately. But what is interesting is when you spike the number of impressions that you are serving and paying for, yet your awareness, your surveyed awareness and consideration and purchase intent continues to plummet, we have a problem. So when there is a delta or a discrepancy between those things, we have a messaging problem, we have a media buying problem. There's some kind of problem that, once again, gives us a diagnostic and points us in a direction of what to fix.
Okay, we're at right about 60 minutes, but we still have quite a few people on the call and quite a few questions coming in, so I'm going to go a couple minutes over. I hope that's okay with you, Jenny. Do you have a minute to answer a few more questions?
As long as my voice holds out, I'm all for it.
All right, well, this is a gear shift into, let's talk about the data. What is your advice on storing data? What's the best approach? Should you store it inside IT? Should you get a third party? What are the pros and cons of each of those approaches?
Sure. Well, obviously, just full disclosure, I'm the CEO of a company that stores a united data hub of all of marketing spend and performance metrics and KPIs. So something like a Beckon is obviously a specialized solution that exists. But the reason why we created a specialized solution is that very often the priorities for IT in an enterprise data warehouse, marketing is not usually the top priority. That's usually more operations and kind of core business data. What's more, marketing data, you remember my slides from the very beginning, the state of marketing data is not in any state of readiness to quickly just and easily upload that into an EDW. So it tends to be the giant pain and huge headache for the IT team is like, how in the heck are we ever going to get some of that marketing data into a structured data format? So what's probably happening is there's, a 10-year roadmap for the EDW and how the data is going to get stored, but marketing is like year 7 or something, because who knows how we're going to get that. Meanwhile, we marketers have to have access to this data, and we got to be making these decisions every single, day or week or month, whatever your cadence is. So having a specialized tool that knows how to aggregate this data and, more importantly, extract the data that matters from all of those messy marketing systems and transform it, right? There's nothing in any of reports that says paid impression or an earned media impression. That doesn't exist. What has to happen is that, this number over here from your Twitter plus this over here from your Facebook plus this over here from your, from your 10 other tools, those numbers have to be aggregated into something new called a total number of earned impressions. And then that has to get divided by, has to move into the numerator position for this, or denominator for a paid to earned media ratio. So a lot of times the data is just not ready, and it does need a lot of help to get the data extracted from your various tools and teams and reports and messy marketing systems into that structured data format and tagged and named in a way so that when it shows up on the scorecard, it makes sense. So there's a lot of massaging that has to happen, and so one of my favorite clients sometimes calls us a chiropractor for his data, keeping everything in alignment, because it's not a one-time thing. It's actually an ongoing, every single day need to keep that data in alignment in order to be reporting and acting on the data in the ways that we've talked about.
That's actually a good segue to this next question. You already answered it. The question was, how do you structure your marketing data so that, for instance, if you're looking at your data in a channel-specific framework and you want to switch over to the buyer's journey framework, how do you handle that? And that's the tagging process that you just talked about, right?
Yeah, exactly. So metadata tagging is the key that unlocks all of that pivoting that question is suggesting. What you want to do is you want to, there might be an impression that comes in. That impression or that number, that metric has so much interesting information around it. It came from report exact target. It was generated by agency OMD. It was for region X. It was for brand Y. It was a campaign that ran against segment males 11 to 17. It was for buyer's journey, primary intent, top of the funnel awareness, and. And the key is that when that data comes in and gets stored, it gets stored with all of that descriptive information. And if it is stored with all of that descriptive information, now you have the ability to say, now show me my buyer's journey for just this one segment, or let's see it for another segment, or let's see it for this other brand or region or this other channel. So that metadata is the key to it. And because we're going over, I'll just simply give you the metaphor, which is this is exactly how finance, and this brings it 360, because the reason why finance has such an awesome reporting and is so well structured is metadata and tagging. They have a general ledger or a chart of accounts that when they set up the books and they created the company, they articulated a set of reporting categories. And every time I do my expenses, I have to describe it. I have to say that it was for travel or for hardware, or for software. I describe the data on the way in, which is what makes reporting instantaneous and pivotable and all of that kind of stuff. So finance cleans up the data mess on the way in. Marketing chooses to leave it all a mess and to sift and sort through the haystack looking for needles of insight at the last minute right before their presentation. So we got to start acting a lot more like our finance counterparts when it comes to data management.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent roundup there at the end, back to the points you made in the beginning. Thank you to all of you who have hung with us over the time limit here. We had a lot of people hang on through the question and answer session, lots of interest. This will be available on demand,